mama never came to my game. My mom had to go to work. So for me, like, I would have never thought too much about it. But having a significant other support you, yes, it's a level of appreciation because she's an amazing woman. Like, being there for me, you know what I'm saying, it's hard. I can imagine. You know what I'm saying? I'm a lot to deal with, you know what I'm saying, but I never want to not let her know that I appreciate her for being there, not just for the games, because her being there for the games was just more so for her. You know,
Nobody expected Stefon Diggs to respond at all. After the Super Bowl loss, after the viral clips started circulating, after fans noticed that he and Cardi B had unfollowed each other, most people assumed he would stay quiet and let the rumors burn themselves out. That's usually how these situations go. An athlete focuses on the game, avoids emotional commentary, and refuses to give the blogs anything to run with. But this time, something shifted. Just days after speculation exploded that Cardi had distanced herself following the Super Bowl drama, Stefon posted a message that felt deliberate. It wasn't long. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't emotional. But it was timed perfectly. The post read, "Pressure reveals who you really are." Within minutes, fans began dissecting every word. Was he talking about the loss? And was he talking about the relationship? Or was he responding to the narrative that he had been dumped publicly? Because that's what social media had already decided. That Cardi had reached her limit, that she was embarrassed, that the Super Bowl had been the final straw. But instead of denying anything or throwing subtle shade, Stefon's tone suggested something else entirely. It suggested that there was more to the story. Sources close to the situation hinted that the breakup wasn't as one-sided as the internet believed, and that what happened behind the scenes that night was far more complicated than what the cameras captured. And if that's true, then the Super Bowl wasn't the ending people thought it was. It may have been the moment everything quietly unraveled. To understand why Stefon's response carried so much weight, you have to rewind to the months leading up to the Super Bowl in this fictional narrative. Their relationship didn't begin in chaos. It actually started quietly, almost unexpectedly, with a series of low-key sightings and mutual support that felt organic rather than strategic. Cardi, known for being loud, expressive, and unapologetically emotional in public, seemed genuinely relaxed around him. Stefon, who typically keeps his personal life guarded, appeared comfortable stepping slightly into her world without fully abandoning his own. On the surface, they balanced each other. She brought vibrancy. He brought steadiness. She thrived in spotlight energy. He thrived in discipline and structure. That contrast initially looked healthy. As the relationship became more visible, though, expectations began creeping in. Cardi was open about claiming her partner publicly. She would joke about wifey energy or hype him up in interviews, and while some of it was playful, it also reflected something deeper. She wasn't interested in casual ambiguity. After experiencing very public ups and downs in past relationships, she seemed determined not to repeat cycles of confusion. When she showed up at games, when she posted supportive captions, when she spoke about him positively, she was building a narrative of stability. Whether she intended it or not, that narrative came with weight. For Stefon, that weight may have felt different. In sports culture, especially at the highest level, image control is delicate. Performance defines identity. Distractions, real or perceived, are amplified. As media coverage of their relationship increased, so did commentary linking his on-field performance to his off-field visibility. Even neutral analysts began referencing Cardi during game coverage. That subtle merging of personal life and professional evaluation can create internal tension, particularly for someone used to compartmentalizing. Then came the weeks leading into the Super Bowl. In this fictional telling, the pressure wasn't just about the game, it was about optics. Cameras would be everywhere. Every reaction would be captured. Every sideline interaction analyzed. Cardi's presence at the event was expected, and with that expectation came attention. The build-up felt celebratory publicly, but privately there were quiet conversations about boundaries. She wanted to show support without being blamed for anything that happened on the field. He wanted focus without appearing distant. The now viral dry good luck clip from the day before the game added subtle fuel. When asked publicly if she had any inspirational words for him, her response came across more restrained than fans were used to. Some interpreted it as sarcasm, others saw it as tension. But what that moment really suggested was emotional fatigue. There had reportedly been conversations behind closed doors about clarity and commitment. When emotional questions remain unresolved, even small public interactions carry weight. The Super Bowl itself magnified everything. The loss alone was devastating from a competitive standpoint. But the post-game optics made things worse. Footage circulated of Stefon interacting with people in his family section that fans didn't recognize. Cardi's early exit from the stadium became part of the narrative. Social media quickly decided what it meant. The storyline solidified almost instantly. She had been embarrassed, and she was done. But that version was incomplete. In this fictional narrative, what happened behind the scenes that night wasn't explosive shouting or betrayal. It was quieter than that. After the game, emotions were raw. He was processing defeat. She was processing perception. She didn't want to feel like a footnote in a narrative that questioned her place. He didn't want to discuss relationship optics immediately after a professional heartbreak. Timing clashed. When two people are already navigating different emotional rhythms, high-pressure moments expose fractures. In the days following the Super Bowl, the unfollows happened. Neither addressed it directly. But that silence fueled speculation. Fans assumed she had dumped him. Commentators framed it as her reclaiming dignity. But inside that silence was something more layered. There had been a conversation, one that didn't involve yelling but did involve honesty. She wanted reassurance about direction. He wasn't ready to promise permanence while still figuring out himself under pressure. And that's the part people missed. The Super Bowl didn't create the problem. It revealed it. When Stefon finally responded publicly with that "pressure reveals who you really are" message, it wasn't random. It was reflective. It hinted that the breakup wasn't simply about embarrassment or being dumped. It suggested that under intense scrutiny, both of them saw parts of the relationship they weren't fully prepared to handle. The internet loves simple endings. But this one was more complicated, and when he later addressed it indirectly in interviews, his tone wasn't bitter. It was measured. Which makes you wonder, was he responding to being dumped or correcting the idea that he ever was? The turning point didn't happen on Instagram. It happened in a locker room hallway. 3 days after the Super Bowl, reporters were still asking safe, predictable questions. Most of them focused on the loss, team adjustments, and what he planned to work on in the off-season. Then one reporter slipped in a question that wasn't about football. "Has everything off the field affected you this week?" It was vague on purpose. No names, no direct references, but everyone knew what it meant. Stefon paused. Not defensively, not angrily, just deliberately. And then he said something that shifted the entire narrative. "And I don't move based on pressure from the outside. I move based on what's real." That sentence didn't confirm anything, but it challenged the assumption that he was reacting to being publicly left. The interviewer followed up carefully. "Are you saying the breakup rumors aren't accurate?" He didn't smile. He didn't dodge. He answered calmly. "I'm saying people think they know the timeline. They don't." That was the first big twist. Because up until that moment, the dominant storyline was that Cardi had reached her breaking point after the Super Bowl optics and walked away. Social media had framed it as a public embarrassment situation. He lost the game. She lost patience. End of story. But his wording suggested something different. Timeline. Meaning what happened publicly might not match what happened privately. Later that same week, during a separate media availability session, he elaborated slightly more. Still no name mentioned, still no dramatic call-outs, but his tone carried weight. When something ends, it's not always one person deciding. Sometimes it's mutual before the world even catches up. Mutual. That word hit harder than anything else, because it implied that the relationship had been under strain before the Super Bowl. It implied conversations had already taken place. It implied the unfollows weren't a dramatic reaction. They were a confirmation of something already decided. Fans immediately split into camps again. Some argued he was trying to regain control of the narrative. Others believed he was subtly correcting misinformation without disrespecting her. But the biggest twist came when a close source in this fictional narrative leaked that there had been a serious conversation about commitment 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. According to that source, Cardi had asked for clarity about where things were headed long-term. Not publicly, not dramatically, privately. She wanted to know if this relationship had a real future, or if it was just enjoying the moment. Stefon, still focused heavily on the season and feeling the weight of championship pressure, reportedly admitted he wasn't ready to promise permanence. That conversation didn't end the relationship immediately, but it changed its tone. So by the time the Super Bowl loss happened, emotions were already layered. He was processing a professional disappointment. She was processing emotional uncertainty, and when cameras captured post-game moments that felt uncomfortable, the internet assumed cause when it was really confirmation. The first shocking twist wasn't that he defended himself. It was that he revealed the breakup had likely been mutual long before the world noticed. But then came something even more unexpected. During a podcast appearance weeks later, when asked about handling relationships in the spotlight, he said something that made headlines instantly. "You can't rush someone into forever because the world is watching." That line wasn't accusatory, but it carried context. It suggested that external expectation, fans, media, narrative pressure, had accelerated something that may have needed slower development. And here's where it got wild. Instead of responding emotionally, Cardi posted something subtle on her story hours later. A short clip of her laughing in the studio with the caption, "Never force timing." It wasn't a direct reply, but it aligned. And alignment in language matters, because now it didn't look like a messy breakup. It looked like two people acknowledging that timing didn't match. The main conflict shifted from who dumped who to were they ever fully aligned? The internet had wanted drama. What they got instead was nuance. He wasn't angry. She wasn't attacking. There were no leaked text messages, no public insults, just two individuals indirectly admitting that pressure exposed differences in pace. And that realization may have been more mature than any viral confrontation could have been. The Super Bowl wasn't where she dumped him. It was where reality surfaced. And when he finally responded, he didn't beg. He didn't retaliate. He clarified. Which makes the situation even more interesting. Because when a breakup ends without bitterness, the door doesn't slam. It just closes quietly. And quiet closures are harder to read. Just when it seemed like the situation had settled into a mature, quiet ending, something shifted again. And this time, it wasn't subtle. A week after Stefon's mutual comments started circulating, a clip resurfaced from a private after-party following the Super Bowl. The video wasn't dramatic. There was no scandal in the footage itself, but timing made it explosive. In the clip, Stefon appeared relaxed, laughing with friends, seemingly unaffected. To some fans, it looked like he had moved on quickly. To others, it looked like someone who had already emotionally detached long before the public realized. That's when escalation kicked in. Commentators began reanalyzing everything. If the breakup was mutual, why did it look like Cardi was the one emotionally invested publicly? Why had she claimed him more openly? Why had she joked about long-term future while he remained more reserved? The narrative started tilting again, not toward villainizing him, but toward questioning emotional imbalance. Then came the second major twist. During a live performance appearance, Cardi addressed relationships without naming names. She said, "Sometimes you love someone, but you realize they love you at a different speed." The crowd reacted immediately. It wasn't an attack, it wasn't shade, but it was honest. Different speed. That phrase echoed what Stefon had hinted at earlier. Suddenly, the story wasn't about betrayal or embarrassment. It was about pacing. And pacing under pressure can make or break even strong connections. The escalation intensified when fans noticed that although they had unfollowed each other, neither had deleted old photos. That detail seems small, but in celebrity culture, it's symbolic. Deleting photos often signals anger. Keeping them suggests respect or unfinished feelings. Speculation reignited. Was this really over? Or was it paused? Then came an unexpected locker room exchange that reignited everything again. When asked directly whether he regretted anything about the relationship, Stefon responded with a sentence that felt layered. "I don't regret loving anyone." That line travelled fast. Because regret implies wishing something hadn't happened. He didn't say he regretted it, he said he didn't, and that changed tone. Fans began interpreting his calm demeanour not as indifference, but as someone who accepted that growth sometimes requires distance. But here's where the second twist truly hit. A source close to the situation revealed in this fictional narrative that the actual decision to officially step back wasn't made at the Super Bowl at all. It was made during a quiet conversation days later when both admitted they felt misaligned emotionally. No yelling, no ultimatums, just acknowledgement. That revelation reframed the dumped at the Super Bowl storyline entirely. Because if the decision came later, calmly and mutually, then the viral optics were misleading. The internet had built an explosive narrative around a moment that wasn't the cause. It was the spotlight. And under that spotlight, everything feels amplified. The escalation phase exposed something deeper about modern relationships in public spaces. When millions of people observe, analyze, and assign motives in real time, even ordinary emotional differences look dramatic. The second twist wasn't scandal. It was maturity. Two people choosing to acknowledge different emotional timelines rather than forcing alignment because the world expected them to stay together. And that's what made the story wild in a different way. There was no public meltdown, no revenge posts, no interviews dragging each other, just layered statements that hinted at reality without disrespect. Which leaves a bigger question hanging. If neither of them regrets the relationship, if neither of them expresses bitterness, if timing was the issue, then is this an ending? Or just a chapter? After the second wave of speculation cooled down, something unusual happened. Nothing. No dramatic subtweets, no surprise interviews, no messy exposés. And that silence said more than chaos ever could. In this fictional narrative, the emotional fallout didn't explode. It recalibrated. Fans slowly began accepting that this wasn't a scandal-driven breakup. It wasn't rooted in betrayal or public humiliation. It was rooted in something far more common and far more uncomfortable. Misaligned timing under extreme pressure. For Cardi, the fallout looked like refocus. She shifted attention back to music almost immediately. Studio clips, performance rehearsals, interviews that centered on career growth rather than personal life. The emotional transparency she's known for didn't disappear, but it matured. When relationship questions came up, she answered carefully. No bitterness, no dramatics, just clarity. "You can't force someone to move at your pace," she said in one interview, smiling softly. That line wasn't defensive. It was reflective. For Stefon, the fallout showed up differently. He returned to routine, training footage, team appearances, structured interviews focused entirely on football. When asked about life off the field, he kept responses short and grounded. "I'm good," he said more than once. That phrase may have sounded simple, but it carried intention. It wasn't dismissive. It was contained. Public perception slowly shifted from who dumped who to maybe this was just grown. That's rare in high-profile relationships. The media, however, didn't let go immediately. Panels debated whether public claiming had accelerated expectations. Or some argued that Cardi's openness created pressure. Others insisted that Stefon's reserved nature made clarity difficult. The debate moved away from drama and toward dynamics. And that's when something interesting surfaced. In a later appearance, Stefon was asked what he learned from the experience. He didn't hesitate. Know yourself before you promise someone something. That line resonated. It suggested that he wasn't blaming her for asking for clarity. He was acknowledging that certainty requires self-awareness first. Meanwhile, Cardi delivered a statement during a separate event that mirrored that growth. Don't confuse chemistry with compatibility. Now the tone had fully changed. This wasn't a breakup rooted in disrespect. It was one rooted in realization. Fans began noticing something subtle. Neither of them erased the relationship from existence. Photos remained. Interviews didn't rewrite history. There was no attempt to diminish what they shared. And that kind of respect alters legacy. The emotional fallout became less about loss and more about perspective. For Cardi, it reinforced her need for alignment. For Stefon, it reinforced his need for readiness. Neither position was wrong. They were simply different speeds. As weeks passed, the headlines quieted. The Super Bowl loss became the main football storyline again. Cardi's music regained center stage. The breakup transformed from trending topic to background context. But here's the part that lingered. When two people part without resentment, it leaves emotional ambiguity. No bitterness means no finality. No regret means no resentment. And when neither side speaks negatively about the other, it suggests something deeper than drama. It suggests unfinished emotional respect. The public and emotional fallout didn't leave wreckage. It left maturity. And maturity creates one lingering possibility that fans can't ignore. What happens when growth catches up with timing? Just when the story felt settled, mature, respectful, quietly closed, something subtle reopened the conversation. It wasn't a reconciliation post. It wasn't a public reunion. It was timing. 3 months after the Super Bowl, during an off-season interview, Stefon was asked a seemingly harmless question about relationships and focus. The interviewer phrased it carefully. Do you think timing matters more than chemistry? Most people expected a generic answer. Instead, he paused, and then he said, Our timing matters more than people admit. Chemistry is easy. Building something when the pressure's loud? That's different. That line immediately reignited speculation. Because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't detached, it was reflective. And almost hopeful. Then came the moment that made fans freeze. When asked if he believed people can reconnect when timing improves, he responded calmly, If it's meant to circle back, it will. Circle back. Not move on. Not never again. Circle back. Within hours, the clip went viral. But what made it truly wild was what happened next. Later that same week, Cardi was spotted leaving a studio session and was asked about love and second chances. She didn't mention names. She didn't confirm anything. But she said something that felt eerily aligned. I don't spin blocks, but I don't close doors that didn't end with disrespect. That sentence carried weight, because their breakup hadn't ended in disrespect. There were no accusations, no cheating scandals, no public humiliation statements, just misalignment and timing. And when two people separate without destroying each other emotionally, the possibility doesn't disappear. It waits. The final twist in this fictional narrative wasn't about secret meetups or hidden text messages. It was about energy. They were later photographed at the same industry event. Not together, not avoiding each other either. They greeted each other briefly, calm, no tension, no performative affection, just familiarity. And that moment confused the internet more than a messy fight ever could have. Because closure without anger is ambiguous. It leaves room. And room invites speculation. The cliffhanger isn't, are they secretly back together? The real cliffhanger is this. What happens when both people grow into the version they needed to be at the same time? What happens when pressure isn't defining the moment anymore? What happens when clarity meets readiness? Because if timing was the real issue, then timing changing could change everything. And sometimes the quietest breakups aren't endings, they're intermissions. So now the question isn't who won the breakup. It's this. Was this really the end? Or was it two people realizing they weren't aligned yet? Because if you look at everything, the calm responses, the lack of bitterness, the mutual language about timing, this didn't feel like a relationship that crashed. It felt like one that paused under pressure. Oh, he said timing matters more than people admit. She said she doesn't close doors that didn't end with disrespect. That's not war, that's maturity. And maturity leaves room for possibility. So I want to hear from you. Do you think Stefon was genuinely responding with growth? Or was he protecting his image after the Super Bowl narrative turned against him? Do you think Cardi was right to ask for clarity when she did? Or should she have moved at his pace? And most importantly, if two people separate because of timing, not betrayal, do you believe they deserve another chance later? Sometimes love doesn't fail. Sometimes it just arrives at the wrong speed. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this a clean breakup? A temporary pause? Or the beginning of something that might circle back stronger? And if you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, layered, dramatic, and unpacking what's really happening beneath the headlines, make sure you stay tuned. Because in celebrity relationships, the loud moments grab attention, but it's the quiet ones that reveal the truth.